Life is hectic, demanding, and doesn't stop. When honest with ourselves, we must confess we often don't know what the hell we're doing. The LARKCAST is an ongoing conversation about the inclusive and mischievous nature of God's presence through the lens of all the things that make up this phenomenon we refer to as life. Astonishing grace and refreshing honesty collide right here for your weekly encouragement.
That music can only mean one thing. The LARKCAST is back, baby. We back. Dang. Good to be back in the saddle, man. What's up, Russ?
It is. How much, man? It's morning. We're recording. We're back from a little hiatus. As some people have said to me recently, hey man, when are you guys going back to work? I'm like,
it is the morning. It is the morning when we're recording. If you're watching on YouTube, you can tell by the bags under my eyes. But if you're just plain old listening to the audio of this, maybe you can tell by the growl in my voice. But yes, we are back. And
sound a little bit like me.
People, yeah, I'm getting closer to you. People were not happy that we took a break. We were getting yelled at.
Yeah, which was encouraging, for sure. To take a month off, and people asking you to come back. But just so we're clear, one of the few things that I had to say to people were, hey, I don't know if you know this, but the podcast is probably the least of the things on my to-do list for what we do with Lark.
It's the least of what we do. But for those of you who are new to the LARKCAST, I'm Tony, and this other guy over here who's wearing a really, really nice shirt today. You're probably gonna want to pause this, jump on YouTube to watch this episode just so you can see Russ's shirt. And the place where he podcasts got him a lamp and a plant as well. It used to just be a black background, but now it looks like he's in like a legit, a space someone cares about.
This is my practice. This is where I meet with my patients.
Wouldn't that be awesome? Dude, probably. What if someone opened up a counseling business and they were just like this, like straight up honest everyday person, no degree? They just told it like according to common sense. Dude, that person would crush it, man.
Probably would. Yeah. That's kind of the world we've moved into now. I don't even tell people I went to college. I keep it quiet. So for those who are listening for the first time, welcome. For those who have been journeying with us, welcome back. For just clarity's sake, this podcast has definitely been a journey in which we've been helping people grab onto a very sort of like core question in life. What is God really like? Mm-hmm. As in, like, what is he truly like? What, not all the messages about Jesus that I've heard in regards to what God's like, but what did Jesus actually say God is like? The parables are probably the best place to discover that answer. And that's what we've been walking through for a season. And man, we're picking back up today with a pretty dope story, man, to unpack from Jesus. One that we often say, like, just, stops you, dead in your tracks, flips everything you've ever thought about life and God right on its head. And
as if the others haven't done that.
Yeah, this one can very well piss you off long before it sets you free. But man, the beauty in this, when you come to the end of your rope and just decide to get honest about yourself, boy, it's good.
Yeah, why don't you read that framing little paragraph you have written up there, so this thing can sit in our brains,
Yeah, it's a good one. God is unimpressed with the labor done in his fields. He keeps no time clock, measures no yields. Thus, his workers cannot differentiate themselves from one another. And at the end of the day, they're all paid well. Overachievers and slackers, the ambitious and the lazy, are all lumped together side by side and given equal share. Jesus compared the kingdom of God to a vineyard operated in this manner. wherein the master is bent on displaying outrageous generosity to any old bum who may stumble into work.
Mhm.
In fact, the only qualification for receiving full pay from this nutty master seems to be showing up by quitting time. Now, that's really great news for anyone who stinks at life. So, if only the winners could get over themselves, everyone might actually enjoy happy hour together.
Nice. I like it.
Yeah,
Yep.
man.
So sometimes we have the time and the energy and the creativity to whip those little dudes up there so that can live in your brain. But we are, as Russ said, we're taking a trip to a winery today. But before we get to spend some time in the tasting room, we have to spend some time in the fields, in the vineyard with the employees. And it's harvest time. There's a big job at hand. And let's just say this job is so big that it takes a lot of people to get the job done. Various people are coming in and out at various different times during the day. The owner of the field is a good dude. He's in a particularly good mood today because the job gets done. And at the end of the day, everybody lines up to get their pay. And some are ecstatic and some are pretty irate. And so the parable is found in Matthew 20, Matthew 21-16. And it reads like this. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. After agreeing with the laborers for the usual daily wage, he sent them into his vineyard. When he went out about 9 o'clock, he saw others standing idle in the marketplace. And he said to them, you also go into the vineyard and I will pay you whatever is right. So they went. When he went out again about noon and about 3, he did the same. And at about 5, he went out and found others standing around and said to them, why are you standing here all day? They said to him, because no one's hired us. He said to them, you also go into the vineyard. When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his manager, call the laborers and give them their pay, beginning with the last and then going to the first. When those hired about 5 o'clock came, each of them received the usual daily wage. Now, when the first came, they thought they would receive more, but each of them also received the usual daily wage. And when they received it, they grumbled against the landowner, saying, these last worked only 1 hour, and you've made them equal to us, and we've bore the burden of the day and the scorching heat. But he replied to them, friend, I'm doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for the usual daily wage? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give to the last the same as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or are you envious because I am generous? So the last will be first and the first will be last.
Bro. There it is, man.
So before we dive into this parable, we want to briefly touch on the context. And if you've been listening to the LARKCAST, we're really kind of diving into the scriptures specifically. So we're kind of looking at, we're reading scripture. We're looking at like what's before it, what's after it. We're looking at other scriptures in light of like the one that is our focus for that day. And for this parable in particular, the context is very, very helpful because of the thing that happens before it and then the thing that happens after it. So here we have this parable of what God's like, and the grace here, the inclusion, the love, the pushing back against earning and winning and striving and measuring and performance just gets dismantled. And it's kind of hard to not imagine that this parable is directly a result from 2 interactions that Jesus has prior to this. One is with a very successful young guy who comes to him just before Matthew 20. And he comes to him and he says, teacher, what good deed must I do to have eternal life? So this dude's pretty successful. But like most successful people, maybe he's coming to realize that life's not all bound up in material possessions or job titles or 401ks or, you know what I'm saying, Ferraris and motorcycles. I don't know what this dude's deal is, right? He's having this kind of like existential crisis, maybe. And he comes to Jesus and he goes, hey, what good deed do I need to do to have eternal life? And so this guy, he's built his life on winning. He's very, very successful. The problem is he thinks the spiritual aspect, this religious aspect, it comes in the same way. What do I have to do? He goes, okay, I'm switching from business now to spirituality. So clearly the same practices and the same disciplines that got me here, right, in life, very successful, are surely going to work on this side. And so he says, what do I need to do? And he's coming to Jesus like, hey man, break it down for me. What's the formula? What's the ABCs? Do you have a master class that I can like listen to, watch or whatever? You can tell in the way he asks the question, it's very telling for how he thinks this all is going to work. So this dude wants to earn it. And so Jesus runs right to the law. He goes, okay, let's see where this dude's at. Right.
I love his question.
Which one's that?
Just, he's like, because this dude's like, what good deeds do I need to do?
Yeah.
And Jesus is like, oh, tell me about this good.
Yeah.
Tell me about that one.
Yeah. He questions his assumption about, his goodness, right? The goodness of his deeds. Yeah. I love it, man. I love it. And so Jesus is like usual. He's trying to help this guy for his joy come to the end of his virtuous rope, come to the end of his striving, come to the end of his winning ways. Because as we've seen in the grace parables, salvation doesn't work in winning. It doesn't work in success. It works in lastness, deadness, leastness, lostness, right? Those who are lost, those who are dead are objects of God's saving love. They embrace it. It doesn't work in a theology of glory, which assumes that, hey, the same way I can climb the ladder at work is the same way I can climb the ladder up to God.
Yeah, you see a lot of guys I've noticed in the business world, friends of mine that are believers, they'll naturally attribute like business practices to what it is to know and follow Jesus.
Right.
For whatever reason, sports always gets thrown in as an analogy. Yeah, because there's like this one place where Paul talks about like, training, and they're like, yeah, man, like we got to train for, train for this discipline and train for, patience and train for honesty and train, all these things. And I'm like, no, guys, those are fruit of the Spirit, not fruit of us. Like the training here is a training yourself to trust in what Jesus has done. But the point I'm getting at is there's like this thing that's in us, that's in all of us, man, that wants to be a winner. Like we are petrified, dude, of that playground insult that haunts all of us to this day. Loser.
Yeah. Well, I'll piggyback on that, a little bit of foreshadowing. If you're a business guy and you're looking to the teachings of Jesus so that you can like build this like Christian business, you're gonna fall flat on your face with this one today. Because if you take the business practices of this vineyard owner, you're gonna be out of business ASAP.
Yeah,
I don't want to get
after you get sued for labor infractions.
Yeah. So, but so back to the successful, young guy, Jesus runs down the law with him, all the like, adultery and honoring father and mother and like, all these things. He goes, yep, crushing it, killing it. I've done it since I was
done all those things since I was a kid.
Been crushing it, dude. Been doing all that. He goes, oh, okay, cool. Here's the phrase Jesus used. If you want to be perfect.
Stop right there. Say that again.
If you want to be perfect.
Dude.
He plays on what this guy thinks is needed.
On what is good. Which is why I ask him, oh, so tell me about this good.
Yeah. He plays.
In other words, I don't think you really understand how perfect, righteous, holy God is. And what it truly means to walk in what is good and righteous and holy, not just in action, but even in your very thoughts and motives, the very core of who you are. I think that's kind of what he's bringing to light. And so, yeah, he walks him through this list. And instead of the guy looking at the list through what it really truly demands and going, yeah, bro, I ain't got it, man. I ain't up to the task like I thought I was. Instead, he ends with crushing it. So again, master storyteller who loves people and brings beautiful wounds says, okay, well, if you want to be, and I love how you said it, perfect, because that's what Jesus says.
If you want to be perfect, take everything you have and give it away. Give it away to the poor. And the dude walked away sad. So Jesus hits him right where his comfort is, right where his trust is, right where his identity is, right where it counts, man.
Yeah.
And the dude walked away sad. And Jesus is really kind of like, he's obviously he's in this conversation, but he's watching this guy walk away, and he has this moment where he just has this like commentary on the moment. And I like Mark's version of the gospel because it says that he was looking at him, almost like Jesus is watching him walk away, and he has this realization. He goes, how hard it is for a rich man to enter the kingdom. And he doesn't say it in like a condemning way. He says it almost like with this, it's almost like with a sadness.
Yeah, it's like a lament.
Yeah. He's lamenting over it for sure. Because I know, like, I've heard that preached in the past, like, yeah, how hard it is for a rich person, and it's like this real like condemning kind of a thing. I think he said out loud what the reality is, because dying to your winning ways when you're so successful, when your whole life is built on winning, right? It's hard to make that shift, man. It's hard to make that shift. Lost sheep and lost sons, lost coins. You're already there. And so maybe it's a little bit easier to grab hold of, a rescue that comes in your dire situation. But man, when you're crushing it at life. So he says how hard it is, and he uses this imagery. It's almost like as impossible as a camel going through the eye of a needle.
Yeah.
And before, I know a few people who listen to this podcast, who, are a little, there's some Bible neatniks, and they're like, well, there's a place in Jerusalem that's called the eye of the needle, and a camel has to strip all of its, cargo off of it in order to fit through this thing, or, whatever.
For the people who go to that world of, well, there's this place, and through the right efforts, there is the case where a camel can make it through this like one section. Okay, cool.
Yeah, you have to get the cargo off of it, and
And of course, there's always debate. I'm like, is Jesus referring to that, or is he just literally looking at everybody who's very familiar with camels and very familiar with needles, and just saying, yeah, you see this tiny opening here called the eye of a needle? Yeah, you see that giant camel over there? Yeah, you see the impossibility of this? And so to me, like, where it lands is just go with what Jesus says. What does he say after that? This is
impossible.
Not possible. This. So,
yeah.
But then he goes on and say, but with God, all things, not some, but all things.
Yeah, possible. I think Jesus is seeing the impossibility of really what he's asking of the world. He's asking them really to come to the end of themselves. And dude, as I know myself and how hard I grab onto the things I think are right, even like in arguments with my wife, it's kind of crazy how much I can just be alive to my side of the story. You know what I'm saying? To just grab onto that winning and my perspective and my side. And I think that's just indicative of just the human heart that is applying to the same, this young man right here too. We can't imagine, we can't lose. We cannot lose.
No, man. It definitely is something that's in us. I think probably the best way I know how to phrase it is, I think what Jesus is getting at in the parable that we're going to be unpacking more in just a minute, and then this story even that we're talking about right now, which all, leads right into, I think, what he's getting at in the story. I think he starts to really address why losers, which is AKA humanity, in light of what's actually good, in light of what's actually perfect, which is what Jesus addresses. All of humanity, right, has lost. And I think there's this thing that he's getting at in which he's starting to help us see why losers are so, just trying so hard to be winners, and why winners are so petrified of admitting they're losers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just this underlying belief throughout time that a better you is needed, it's possible, and it's pleasing to God. Like your humanity is this obstacle that you need to overcome so that you don't miss out. It's like that is the lie in the garden.
Mm-hmm.
And since that moment, people have been selling that snake oil in churches and companies and causes and governments alike, bro.
Mm-hmm.
That a better you is needed, it's possible, and pleasing to God.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we can just get all the right facts and just get all the right disciplines to overcome this humanity, then we'll have the ideal self and the ideal society.
Yeah.
And we don't actually find that with God, but we do find it within all of humanity, which I think is why it's so freaking hard for us to just admit, yeah, dude, I ain't got it, man. Grace only makes sense when you realize you're not up to the task.
Yeah.
And when you find that God never asked you to be in the first place.
Yep. So it really is an impossible thing. And so this guy walks away sad. Well, the disciples, they get a little bit frustrated because they just watch Jesus call a guy to give up everything he has to follow him. And he walked away and was able to keep everything he had, but he's not following Jesus. And Peter, of course, it's Peter, right? Because he's the don't think before I speak, foot in mouth, brash, just say it how it is kind of a dude. And he was like, well, what about us? We've left everything. We've literally left everything to come follow you. What are we gonna have in the end? Right?
What are we gonna get, man?
Yeah. And it's almost like this question of like, well, what do we get for giving up everything?
Yeah, he literally says, well, then
question of fairness.
Who can be saved then?
Yeah.
Who can be saved if this is like what's needed of all of us?
Yeah, no, thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, he was just like, well, what the heck? Who can get in? This almost seems like Peter's picking up on the impossibility, of it. And then he's asking this question of fairness. Well, we've been following you this whole time. Like, what do we get at the end of the day? And isn't it funny that he says, what do we get? Because we've sacrificed all for you. What do we get at the end of the day? He tells a parable about some people who've been working in the fields all day and a moment of what they get at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. And you can just, before we jump into the parable more, like if you could just stop for a second and think, like, I get kind of where Peter's coming from.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you're not paying attention to the words, which I think is what we all do, we just run through things without actually stopping and looking at the word that he used and going, well, what does that word mean? Like the other day, I posted something about faithfulness, like that our faith is not validated by our faithfulness.
Yeah.
And somebody reached out like, dude, that's crazy. That's not true. And I'm like, well, faithfulness by definition is to be full of faith. So if you attached works to it, then we're no longer talking about faith or faithfulness.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh my God, dude, I've been literally leading in churches for years and just skipped right through the actual meaning of the words that were used. I think with this dude wanting to know, what good deeds do I need to do? And then going on and thinking he's actually done the good deeds. Jesus just sort of helps him really see what being perfect is. But if you're not careful, you can almost think Jesus is bringing like some addition to the law of Moses. And now he's just doubling down, and God just actually is opposed to rich people and is out to like really just make it hard on them. In fact, he's against all of us having any sort of like money,
right?
Which is completely in line and very popular with a lot of what we see in the world today, but is completely out of sync with everything God has actually said about money and having it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you could see why Peter's like, well, man, like what about us, man? Like, what do we need to do? Seriously, like what does anybody need to do? And I love the long gaze that Jesus has there, where he gets into like, hey, just so we're clear, like with man, as you've already brought up, right? This is impossible, but but with God, all things are possible, including saving a world that's in love with an imaginary scorecard that they can't even keep up with.
Yeah.
Because I mean, that's just what grace is and how it works. I love the way Capon says it, an eye for an eye. All an eye for an eye does is double the number of eyeless people going around wreaking havoc in the world. So there has to be some other means for us, because this list keeping ain't gonna do it, bro. And I think that's where Jesus like kind of looks at where the sadness that he has for this guy who's trusted in what he thought he brought to the table. And he's petrified of actually admitting who he really is and what he really needs. And then he's looking at the disciples who are questioning their eternity because they think they've done it, but yet they're wondering, like, have I done enough? And dude, I think that's all of us, man.
We ask, what must I do?
Right.
Not what is God like, because we assume what God is like. We assume he plays by the same rules that all of life plays by.
Yep.
So since we assume that, we're like, okay, well, what do I got to do? And the better question is, what is God like? And into all this rich dude who walks away, these disciples that are frustrated because they're wanting to know what's in it for them in the end, to all of it, the impossibility of it, the lamenting of it, the sadness of it, Jesus launches into a parable to say what God is like. And the parable's simple. It's straightforward. This guy has a vineyard. It's harvest season. It's a big job at hand, and he needs lots of hands, more than what he thought at the beginning of the day. And he hires some guys in the morning, some guys a few hours later, more guys a few hours after that, and then some guys an hour before quitting time. And at the
big
end
job
of the
to
day,
get done.
At the end of the day, he pays them all the same thing.
Yeah. And if you can play that scene out in your mind for just a minute, you wonder, because to me, the key to that whole parable is the end, in which case Jesus seems to paint a picture of God being this father, this vineyard owner who's in a good mood and for fun takes the people who just showed up an hour before quitting time and moves them intentionally, Jesus says, to the front of the line. He makes the last first in line and pays them first. And I don't know if those guys, like, part of me says like struggle of humanity and this how petrified we are of indiscriminate grace, right? Like I tried to buy dude lunch yesterday and he just refused to not take care of the tip. Like he just could not fathom just letting me pay the bill and pay the tip. And I've been there, just to be clear. You know what I mean? Like there's this thing in it. So you wonder if the people who got paid were like quiet, almost like frustrated that they got paid all this because they didn't earn it. Or you wonder if they were the types who were like, bro, this dude's paying $250 an hour, you know, like holding up a check. In which case, everyone in line, including the people at the very back of the line, probably start doing the math. And they're like, what? $250 an hour? And they start adding up. We've been here 8 hours. And that's what they've got in mind.
Yeah.
And when they get up to their spot, bro, and they get handed $250, it's like ruh-roh.
Yeah. Yep.
And out it
so
comes.
For me, like this kind of hits me in a personal way because my uncle owned a fire restoration company. So growing up, you know, summers as a kid, when I was in high school, you know, 15 years old, I'm going on job sites, houses that had a fire, and we're gutting these houses and fixing them up. And I remember one of the first things he told me, because I was learning everything, you know, I went demo to, you know, the carpentry crew to the painting crew, drywall. I was learning everything. I think he wanted me to take the business over. I remember one of the first things he told me was, don't tell anybody how much you make an hour. I don't think it was a favoritism thing, because he started me off at $5 an hour, kicking ceilings down with it blown in insulation, because I was the smallest dude on the crew. Hey, go open that ceiling and kick the ceiling down. All the rest of the guys are older and fat, and I don't think it wasn't a favoritism thing. It really speaks to really what we're talking about here. You can totally picture those dudes doing the math. I know it. I've been there, you know, and it just speaks to the fact that like that fairness and counting and status based on pay too. It was definitely like, all right, who's the main dude on the job? All right, this guy's the lead guy. He gets paid more. You know what I'm saying? We are always sizing each other up. We're always looking at our performance versus another guy. Well, I know that guy makes 20 and I only make 17. And I'm out here, I'm more skilled than him, and I'm busting my ass. You can totally imagine them being super pissed. I'd be pissed.
Yeah. And it's sad, man. But when you cut through all the noise, you realize that then and now, your status is basically significance. And this sense of significance for a lot of people right now is just straight up salvation, man.
Yeah.
Like their very sense of security in this world. And you could see all of it, kind of crumbling right before their very eyes. No different than it crumbled before the rich young ruler's eyes, who thought his status was his significance and his significance was his salvation, and then realized, oh, yeah, that status I thought I had, in reality of what it actually means to be good. I failed. And of course, in his case, man, he walked away. Where in the disciples' case, it was like going back and doing the math, man, and running through their list and wondering, like, have I done enough? Like, seriously, like I feel like I'm there, but just to be clear, Jesus. Yeah, dude. You see that whole scene play out, and man, it's the way that Jesus tells the story. It was the people who worked all day that they got an issue with this. To me, that's most fitting to the disciples that Jesus is telling this story to, kind of where they're coming from.
I can't think of a more vivid way to point to this. Really isn't about what you do or don't do. It's really just about my generosity, my love, my grace, and how I want to treat humanity than this. It's so perfect, because we get it at the most like basic, level. God in Christ has died to all bookkeeping, all scorekeeping, all counting, all merit, all demerit. And it's the most important question is, what is God like? And Jesus is telling us what he's like.
Yes.
And so if you are the type that is, looking at the scriptures, right, that we talked about earlier, as someone who's going to find like a playbook for how to run a business, how to run a family, how to do relationships, grace is a horrible model for success.
Yes.
It's a horrible model for success.
100%.
It's a horrible model for winning. It's a horrible model for keeping everybody happy. It's a horrible model for all those things. Like, imagine if someone built a business on let's call it the kingdom ethic of Matthew chapter 20. Dude, I live in Northwest Indiana, so there's a lot of union labor right around me, especially among the trades, but exclusively in the steel mills, railroads, oil refineries up on Lake Michigan's South Shore, right? And the unions were formed around better wages, reasonable hours, and better conditions. Now, Russ, you were with me when we saw this. But last time you were in Northwest Indiana, we were driving through my city, and there's a new daycare that was recently built where I live, and they didn't choose union contractors. And so here's what the unions do. They sent protesters with, I'm not kidding you, a 25-foot wide banner. And all it said on it was shame on kitty daycare. And they had a huge, giant inflatable rat that was horrifying. If this thing was a toy inside this daycare, it would have traumatized a child. Okay.
Yes.
And there's, 4 or 5 guys out there holding up this banner. And it just says shame on kitty daycare for not doing the fair, right, and just thing. If this
in
dude's
their minds, the fair, right, and just thing. Yeah.
If this dude's vineyard was in Chicagoland where I live, holy crap, dude.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not to mention like that little point that you brought up, just a side little fun note is like the vineyard owner, Jesus says, goes and hires a crew, offers a wage, and just to be clear, according to the story, pays those people exactly what he promised, what they agreed to.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, with each, a few more hours, some more people, a few more hours, some more people, a few more hours, some more people, right? And then down to the 1 hour before quitting time. We think like, oh yeah, you just went out and grabbed a few more. Oh, cool, man. We don't like sometimes stop and take all this into account. Like, no, dude, if you were left around all day long without a job, if you went down to like where you live, if you went down to the union hall, right, to pick up work and no one picked you up and you were there all day long, all day, and no one picked you for their crew, you're drinking coffee. You've now, tapped into your buddy's flask who's sitting at the table next to you reading magazines. You're not exactly the cream of the crop, dude, that anyone's looking for to come work for them.
Yeah, there might be a few, needles in the haystack around there, but
yeah,
typically
anybody
how
who's
it
a
goes,
good worker has been picked up, right?
Yeah.
Been picked up already.
Yeah, I was talking to a union. He owns a union plumbing outfit. And he was a buddy. I was talking to him the other day, and he was talking about his business is growing. He goes, "Yeah, man, I'm trying to find the right person." He goes, "Dude, I don't want to go to the hall, dude. Like all those dudes, here's the phrase: they're there for a reason.
There for a reason. All right. So how many times in society have we heard, well, yeah, so-and-so's in that boat and they're there for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
This is the crew that gets picked up an hour before quitting time. These are the people who just got paid the same as the winners in society who aren't there for a reason. In fact, they're up here for a reason. And got paid the same. So you start to really see the outrage here, man, like in this story.
Right.
And it ends basically with, Jesus telling them
can I say one really, really quick thing on that?
Yeah.
Is I think we all love the like a generous story. What was the name of that show where they used to like flip people's houses in 24 hours and they'd pull the truck away and they'd reveal what was it, like not House Flippers or
I don't know, man.
the
like
show.
1,000 of those shows that have come out since then, but I know
where everybody rallies around this, this person has this story, and a lot of times they'll dive into their story and it's like usually like it's hard luck, or maybe they had a tragedy, or you know what I'm saying, they were like this they were a lovable family. They were there was something about them that was just endeared your heart to them. And we all celebrated. Yeah, they were deserving of the grace. That's a great way to say it.
Oxymoron. But that's how we think.
Yeah.
That's how we
think.
But
it's like how that show would get canceled if it was like, we just redid this like meth addict's house.
Right.
We would be outraged, by that. We love grace if it fits.
Yep. That's such a great point. And I think it really helps us see the outrage in the story, man. And it all moves towards Jesus, basically, ending the story with, people are up in arms. They've done the math in their heads. They're getting all excited, hey, Ricky Bobby, this dude's paying $250 an hour, man. Wait till we get, till we get up to the front of the line. So they're not happy, man, when all this happens. But there's a word to me that's really important here that Jesus uses. It's in the actual original language in the scriptures. Okay. It's a Greek word and it's equivalent to like, hey, pal. So when they start to grumble about how they received what they agreed to work for, just to be clear, that the vineyard owner paid them. They're all up in arms because of this undeserving crew up here that got equal share. And so they're upset. But in Jesus's, the way he tells the story is the vineyard owner is like, he's annoyed, man. He literally responds with this like unfriendly word for friend. Okay. It's the equivalent of being, like I said, like, hey, pal.
Hey, pal. Hey,
yeah.
bud.
Hey, Buster.
Hey, who you calling guy, pal?
Ironically, it's the same word that was used toward Judas at his betrayal. Right? Like that's kind of a needed note here, man, because the vineyard owner's not happy with this. He basically says like, man, you're telling me what I can do with my money? Look, I just wanted to have some fun here, man. I put these people at the front of the line to show everyone that there are no insiders and outsiders here. None. When I'm happy, everybody's happy.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I did this, to show you what I'm really like, to move everybody away from all these things that are constantly dividing you from each other and robbing you of the very joy of what it means to be alive. So you could all just get to happy hour and enjoy the open bar that I've got over here for free. And it's the only open bar that this world is ever going to know.
Amen, dude.
And that's all I'm trying to do here. Like I started thinking about it, and it's almost like he's making this point. Back up now and take the rich young ruler context that we talked about earlier and the disciples. And it's almost like Jesus is saying everyone is in the payout line, okay? Not the payment line. Everyone is in the payout line. No one is in the payment line.
Oh, that's good.
If you actually know what is good and what is needed. If you could just grasp that, it's truly, dude, life-changing. It's kind of what you're saying. Everyone's getting equal pay.
Yeah. If you're standing in the payment line, and there is a line, and there is a line.
Yeah.
If you're standing in the payment line, and there is a line, the person who's got their hand out receiving payments, that's not the God that Jesus describes.
No, if you're in a payment line,
it could be a group of friends that you're trying to fit into. It could be a parent that you're trying to appease. It could be yourself you're trying to prove something to. It could be a social just idea of what you ought to be or whatever. It could be, a religious voice, the voice of a pastor, the voice of a spiritual mentor telling you that you got to do all these things to be perfect, right?
This is what a faithful Christian is, right? And then you go down the list of all these things that we got to get together.
He's a giver. He's a giver.
Yeah. And Jesus in this story says, everyone is in the payout line. If you're in a payment line or even think you need to be in one, or you're trying to get into one, then you are in a line that does not lead to me. You are operating in good faith to the wrong God.
Yep.
Because my line is a payout line, and everyone gets equal pay, not because they're deserving, but because I'm good. This is how grace works. It works by raising the dead. It doesn't work by improving people who are improvable. It's like,
dude,
that's what he's getting at. Man. Your humanity is not something I've ever asked you to overcome, ever. And in your constant pursuit to do so, you're literally, ironically, losing what it means to be human altogether.
Yep.
So if you could just grab onto this, we could realize that friendship is actually assumed with God and each other, not acquired. Can we head to happy hour now? Can we just get over here, dude, and get to drinking in celebration of the God who met us where we are and did all that was needed so we could live and breathe and dwell together with harmony, man?
And dude, as freaking good as that news is, and that was fantastic, dude. I love that. I loved every bit of that. And as good as that is, man, there are going to be some who just insist on that not being the case. And they are going to get scandalized. They are going to get frustrated. They are going to be angry, and they are going to insist on merit and demerit. They're going to insist on scorekeeping. They're going to insist on bookkeeping. They're going to insist on resumes. They're going to insist on fairness. They're going to insist on good deeds. And this message is going to straight up anger them and frustrate them. And they will refuse to put a smile on their face and order a drink at the bar during happy hour, which is paid for by the owner. They're going to refuse.
You're saying that with an envelope full of cash in your pocket.
Yeah.
And a free drink in your hand. So it's like the denying of our very existence. But I look at this story from Jesus, man, and all of a sudden I pull back and I'm like, wow. Rich young rulers are free to not be anxious and sad. Disciples who are wondering if they've done enough are free to not be exhausted and bitter. Everything, dude, that is robbing us of the joy that we're looking for comes from seeing a reality that's right under our nose and what God is actually like, according to what Jesus really said.
Yep.
Now, if we would just be willing to take him at his word, maybe all the Facebook wars could come crashing to an end.
Are people fighting on Facebook?
Oh, bro. It's insanity, man.
Really?
This is the parable, the story of a God who's like a nutty vineyard owner who gives out equal pay to unequal work just because he's that good.
Just shut up, receive it, smile, and rest in it, man.
Amen.
And trust it. That's
Amen.
it. That's it. When all the work is finished, John 19:30, it is finished. When all the work is finished, the only thing left to do is just trust it, rest in it, receive it, and live your life in light of it.
Yep. So until next time, where we get into another doozy of a parable, the one that has definitely caused more stir than probably anyone I've ever taught, ever. And amen for it, man.
Next week's going to be good. But until next time, cheers.
Cheers.